One thing I've always tried to make clear is that look, there are some good Tories. Do you, or do I at least agree with them 100%? No. But I have always advocated that what you've got to look at is what is going to be the end result? What is going to be the positive result of that comes out of it? So one of the best examples is I can think of rejoining the EU. We on the left have to reach out across the aisle to anyone of any political affiliation who agrees that actually the UK should be in the EU, because that will have a good positive outcome for the UK. And I think that if you were, and let's say you were an MP and you were maybe in a hung parliament, or maybe you wanted to get a bill passed, reaching out to the other side to, let's say, try and give renters more power. Now, they may not agree with you 100%, but if you can sort of maybe win them over and talk to them why this would be good for, their constituents who are renting, then there's no reason to engage with someone from a different political party to bring them over. That's what politics is really all about. It is about debate, and it is about debating the policies and the reason for the outcome of those policies. If it has a good policy outcome, then I see no reason not to reach across the other side of the aisle and say, hey, can we work together on this? Can we get stuff done? But other times, of course, certainly the current Tory party is so split that even the Liberal Tories, many of them who were indeed pro EU, who got kicked out by Boris Johnson of course, the 2019 general election, even ejecting Winston Churchill's own grandson, they're in very short supply. And in the coming, Tory civil war, this Tory liberal faction, it's going to have some part to play in this civil war. And this is what they have come out today. They have come out swinging, saying, look, if we cannot offer policies to help, win over young people, we're finished, completely finished as a party. And this isn't the first time we have covered Tories talking about this, that we are seeing that our popularity with people under 40 is tanking, and that this traditional idea that we see as people get older, they sort of gravitate over to us. Well, that's no longer happening. Traditionally, the over 40 market would keep a very, nice line. But even that's tanking, because they are not offering things to young people to get them to vote for them. And if you are a political party and if you want people's votes, well, then you've got to offer something for them to vote for. And sometimes it can be single issue things. It can be say, well, I really would like that, but the rest of the stuff I'm not too interested in. But you know what? If we can get that done, fantastic. Like I say, we'll see what happens when we get to Labour manifesto. I am looking forward to when we get to read that. But I want to cover this because this is kind of important, because it really speaks to the complete lack of direction, the lack of uncertainty, and once again, the fact that Rishi Sunak is completely a weak prime minister, where you've got this liberal faction saying, hey, we need to look at the reality of the situation, because if we don't, we are going to lose. Whereas he is trying to appease the right wing of the party by not undoing the pensions triple lock that has been so long a Tory policy, dating all the way back to the Cameron era. So we'll see what eventually happens. But I'll tell you now, this upcoming conference season is going to be interesting. Yes, I've said it before, Rishi Sunak has got to give the performance of a lifetime, and I do not think he's capable of doing that. He might say some nice things and some nice platitudes, but at the end of the day, I do not think that is going to work very well at all. So, let's see, of course, what this has been going on and what these Tories have been saying about. Look, we need to sort of offer these people things, or if not, we're sunk as a party. So before we do go diving into that, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and one notification link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And of course, as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel that way. Like I say, there is the YouTube thank you button, and of course, the Pony Club down below as well. So this is, of course, comes from The Guardian, with the senior Tories warn that if we can't offer policies to win over the young, we are sunk. So senior Tories are urging Rishi Sunak to use his next manifesto to address their party's alarming unpopularity among the younger voters, amid the increased concern that the Conservatives could be sunk without urgent action to win the under 40s. With mounting anxiety among moderate Tories, the party is failing to prioritise the policies on net zero and help for renters that could attract young voters. Tom Tugendhat, the cabinet minister, who is among the figureheads of the party's liberal wing, has become one of the most senior figures to urge a rethink. In comments in a gathering of the moderate Tory reform group, the security minister warned that the party can no longer just sit around and assume that voters will just simply turn to the party as they get older, an assumption he has warned may no longer be true. Because that's what they used to rely on. That was the Tory grand strategy. Doesn't matter that because the older people get, we can just start to cream them off. They'll become Tories. That is what has traditionally happened. But over the past 10 years, that has not happened. And their popularity is tanking. And they are recognizing that, especially younger people, are slowly becoming more politically active, which is a good thing. I praise that because it's something that has much needed to happen. But you can see that they are now becoming increasingly aware of, oh, we urgently need a rethink. We actually need to do something. And this isn't new. This goes back a couple of years indeed. We once covered a talk that was given at the Tory party conference, and the response was that if you were to view that talk and you didn't know that it was given at a Tory party conference and not like a fringe event during the Tory party conference, we're talking the actual Tory party conference. You had a guy there saying, look, if we don't do this, and this, which were, to be honest, incredibly progressive for things for a Tory to be saying, you could have mistaken that as something that Jeremy Corbyn, or is this some sort of momentum event? So there is this idea that they need to do something, that urgent rethinks of their own policies need to be taken place. But this is very much something that the Liberal wing has been warning about in the party for quite some time. And they are not getting any headway because, well, their bless me, their power, their factional power has very, very much dimmed. But if, as we can see during this complete potential Tory wipeout that could happen, all of a sudden, depending on who survives, who keeps their head above water during this oncoming tidal wave, well, all of a sudden, this Liberal wing might suddenly find itself having a lot of say, having a lot of power. But regardless, there will be an oncoming civil war, and it will be between whatever the hard right of the party wants versus, well, whoever's left. And even then, if it is just like the hard right, fanatics left over, well, they'll be having their own civil war between who gets to take the throne. And oh boy, that will be interesting. But this is what he had to say. So, there isn't a conservative in the country that doesn't believe that opportunity for people to have a home and a family, and whatever that family looks like, is vital. And we need to be the party of aspiration, helping people to achieve that ideal with conservative policies, he told the gathering last week, saying that there are areas that we can be doing more, especially when it comes to young people and the next generation. We need to ensure that young people have those opportunities to help them get ahead. We can't leave them behind. Let's look at what we offer to the under 30s, especially when it comes to any future manifesto. There once was a time where people said that the electorate would become more conservative at 40. And I'm sure that was necessarily not true anymore. But we can't just sit around and wait for that to happen. So, shockingly, they're realizing, oh no, our policies are turning a large section of the people off, and because we haven't been onboarding these people into, like, conservative policies. um there was the big thing that Margaret Thatcher did with people being able to buy their own council homes. There was a big increase in people voting Tory because they felt that that was a reason to vote Tory, that now they had their own home. They felt more secure, that they felt that actually the Tory party was somehow, taking care of them. But of course, that goes back to the 80s, and you will actually find a couple of people back from way back then. I wouldn't be surprised if there are people on this channel who have parents or know someone very similar like that, who they got their own council home through Thatcher's right to buy initiative, and then all of a sudden they started voting Tory. Um, it's what used to happen. People felt more comfortable in their living situation. They felt that the status quo that the Tories had provided was sort of good for them, and they would switch over. That was what used to traditionally happen. But that has not been happening because, well, of their own short-sighted policies. They did not think the long term to rebuild that housing stock so that more people could buy those housing. Instead, we are in a housing disaster, not just a housing crisis of their own making. So we'll see what happens to this. But it is very interesting to see that they are starting to realize that, oh, if we don't actually do something, then we're doomed. We are very, very much doomed. So he also continued. Tugendhat said that any offer to young voters had to include sticking with the party's commitments to achieving net zero by 2050, despite the increasing unease over the policy on the Tory right, saying, "We know the type of policies that young people want to see from us too. We know they care about the environment, and as Conservatives, this echoes with our commitment to conservation," he said. uh, Again, this is something that the Tories are going to go to war over. Their whole idea of net zero. Do we do it? Do we not do it? Do we slow it down? And like I say, you've got Steve Barker, the ex ERG chairman, basically converting the whole Euroscepticism argument of we're just asking questions about net zero. And in reality, they are doing everything they possibly can to scupper any net zero policy they possibly can. And here's the thing, I would say to Tugendhat, there have been policies that could have been good. You know, the Northern Powerhouse idea from Cameron and Osborne, if they had followed through with that and actually gone through ahead with it, it would have actually been a good policy, leveling up these places and even leveling up itself. Had they actually committed to it, it would have been very, very much improved these areas that they suddenly claim that they cared so much about. But this is because of the Tory short-sightedness. They do not want to spend money in these areas because, well, why should we? These are Labour areas. Why are we going to spend money there? Hence the whole Rishi Sunak speech of, well, we took money from these poor areas that don't deserve it and gave it to the rich areas. Like I say, that should be played on repeat at the next general election. But he also continued with this. He said that's one of the reasons why we need to keep the green policies, which we can see will create thousands of jobs and boosting our greener infrastructure. His comments also come as the latest opinion poll reveals that Labour maintains a 15-point lead over the Tories, with a crucial party conference season now rapidly approaching. And these results indicate that Labour has a 46-point lead amongst voters between the age of 18 and 34. And opinion polls over the last year have regularly recorded that Labour has a lead amongst the age group of over 40 points or more. And you've got to think, as this age group gets older, they aren't transitioning to Tories. They are not transitioning to Tories at all. And you get the idea that eventually the Tories would be slowly wiped out, because they're not really producing any proper policy that is giving people the idea to, oh, well, maybe we should vote Tory. They haven't really been doing a good job for the last 10 years, which is, to be honest, has turned a lot of people off, which has been a very good thing because you've seen this lack of policy, this lack of long-sighted, um, long-term thinking, which they could have done, which would have probably bore a lot of good fruits had they actually decided to go in that direction. And they have just not decided to do so because, of course, the Leveling Up white paper is the perfect example of this, where you had the first two chapters analyzing, saying this is what the problem is. We need we need an industrial strategy. We need an idea of what we are exactly going to do, and this is the first time we've ever thought about it. And all this money that we need to invest into these areas, and what we're going to do with that money. And then, of course, you get to the treasury sector, and of course, Rishi Sunak's fingerprints were all over it, not even spending the money required. And as we said at the time, it was a drop in a bucket of what was really needed to really level these places up. And we'd always been saying it, leveling up was just a fancy slogan. And unfortunately, a lot of people fell for it, partly because, of course, of Boris Johnson delivering the message. Of course, it continues. So Tugendhat's views also reflect the wider concern among MPs. Former Minister Stephen Hammond, the MP for Wimbledon, has said, "It is difficult to disagree with Tom's comments. If we do not have policies that resonate with the next generation of voters, we are sunk. We need to build more, drive more environmental friendly growth, and create skills for the jobs in the tech world of the future." Well, excellent, great. Why haven't you been doing that? You've been in power this long, and yet you've done none of that. And this is the ultimate comeback to all of this. You've been in power this long, you recognize this now, but you're pretty much guaranteed to lose the next general election. I am not expecting there to be this grand U-turn on these policies. In fact, to be honest, I am going to predict now that the Tory manifesto that they will put out will be so muddled, so confused. It is going to make the Labour 2019 manifesto look competent by comparison. So, Liberal Tories have, of course, been pushing hard for the party to show more enthusiasm for its pro-green policies after Sunak's recently criticised a hair-shirt approach to tackling the climate crisis. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt has also vowed not to adopt Joe Biden's subsidy bowl, approach referring to the Biden's Inflationary Reduction Act, which, by the way, has proven to be very, very good. Very, very good indeed. And that is something that we have seen countries in the EU approach, even the EU itself doing something very similar. But Tories, oh no, we can't do that. Yeah, the Inflation Reduction Act is going to have a massive boost to the US economy. Massive boost to the US economy. And yet, oh no, we can't do that. We can't replicate that. It just goes to show you their lack of ambition. And yet, as you said at the top there, we want to be the party of ambition and looking towards the future. Well, why aren't you building towards that net zero future? And even Tom Tugendhat, even though he's saying these comments, he's been in power for quite some time with the Tories. Why have you not been pushing harder for these things? Why have you not been making sure that these things get done within your party? Oh, that's right, because they've been too preoccupied with everything else. It's honestly, it's too little, too late, I think. But maybe this will survive the coming Tory tsunami. Maybe this Tory Liberal faction participates in the Tory civil war, and like I say, that will be fun to watch when all that starts to unfold. Um, but yeah, like I say, they are very, very specifically going after the right, and it is the right that is the moment the far more powerful faction, and even then, the right is split into its own different factions. So they're not exactly united in their own policy proposals either on the right. Meanwhile, Sunak is also under pressure from the right of the party not to abandon the pensions triple lock, with the Treasury understood to be exploring ways for a temporary tweak to the policy that could save over £1 billion. Siphon Aarons, the national chair for the Tory Reform Group, said that more needs to be done to address intergenerational unfairness. This doesn't mean that we have to scrap the triple lock to punish one set of voters to support another's, but we must show that we understand the challenges facing those in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. It is by no means a coincidence that people are more likely to vote Conservative now when they turn 50. This is what is it, of course, our offer to younger generations. It cannot just be more of the same. Any sensible manifesto next year needs policies to focus on housing, rental reform, childcare costs. And by the way, rental reform, you've been promising that for years, at least more than 5 years now. You've done nothing on that. Childcare costs, the infrastructure investment across the UK, not just in London. Well, again, you promised that. You haven't delivered on that in 13 years. And of course, greener policies. And after 13 years, this government needs to be bolder in driving jobs growth and economic growth that will benefit generations of voters. And there's your problem. You have had 13 years in power to do that. And you have done nothing. Absolutely nothing. When the Tories probably leave office next year, they will be leaving office of a UK in a far, far worse state than when David Cameron took office. And that is through their own short-sighted policy proposals. There is no one to blame for the absolute mess that they have created other than themselves. And I will say this now to anyone. I would gladly say it to Tom Tugendhat's face or any other of these liberal Tories that are saying this. It's too little, too late. Why weren't you doing this stuff years ago? You've had all this time, and yet now you're only realizing this. But back to it. So concerns about the offer for younger voters, of course, have been rumbling all year along with the Tory moderates. Ben Arlfin, the former Tory vice chair, until he resigned during Boris Johnson's prime ministership, warned that the issue could be an existential for the party. And it will be. It will be, because the Tories have always very, very much focused on the older end of the voter bloc. And to do that, you've got to balance out that generational unfairness. That it's how do you go about doing that? How do you do that without, annoying your traditional voter base? Every single time the Tories have tried to do that, they have failed or made, nice words about, oh yes, we're going to do some renter reform that will give renters in England, more power, but they haven't done that. Take for example, 0 hour contracts. Since David Cameron, they have been promising to end 0 hour contracts, and in 13 years they have not ended 0 hour contracts. And all it would take is one vote in Parliament to end 0 hour contracts. And you don't even have to end 0 hour contracts. You could do, I think, what they do in the Netherlands, I think it is, where you go, well, look, you can be on a 0 hour contract, but only for like, I think it's like 3 to 6 months or something like that before they actually have to put you on a proper hours contract. There's a ton of stuff that they could do with just that alone if they wanted to, but they have done nothing. And I've always said this, that their inaction on this subject means that is a tacit sort of approval and of 0 hour contracts, that they want to keep them, that they really don't care. And I will say it now, it's honestly, it's too little too late. It is too little too late. Um, far too late for all this stuff. Of course, he was speaking as part of a report by the centre-right Onward think tank back in May that showed that nearly two-thirds of millennials said that the Tories deserved to lose the next election. It concluded that those aged between 25 and 40 saw the Tories as dishonest, incompetent, and out of touch. And there you go. Nice words you're all saying in this article, guys, but you've had 13 years in power and you have done nothing of that. You've done absolutely nothing. And here's the thing. Liberal Tories, as I said at the beginning of this video, what couldn't have liberal Tories said, well, if our own party is not going to go with these ideas, can we not reach across the aisle to Labour or the Lib Dems to help support some of these ideas and policy proposals and get some of this stuff done? No, they haven't even tried that. So they are saying nice, fancy, flowery words, but they have shown nothing to actually deliver on any of those words whatsoever. So while there is a push to focus on these young voters in the next manifesto, the issue is a long-running one. Even in the party's clear win at the last election, the Tories only secured 19% amongst the 18 to 24-year-olds. And while an aging population and a huge support amongst all the voters meant the lack of support from the young did not stop the Tories from winning, a majority, voters aged 40 and under could cast more votes than baby boomers at the next year's election. And that's their existential crisis. And I don't think they can solve it. It's as we said from here, nice flowery words, guys, but where have you been for the past 13 years trying to promote and do these policies? Or when some of these policies have been brought forward, why were you not fighting to keep these policies? Or even, as we said earlier, reaching across the aisle to Labour and the Lib Dems to get some of these policies done? It's pathetic. It's too little, too late, and I don't know what else to say to you guys, but good luck in the Civil War. Good luck. Because I'll tell you what, after the next election, the Tories have to prove that not only is their incompetence not there anymore, which will be incredibly hard to prove, but they've got to prove that no, they are in touch with the average voter. And to be honest, you're still going to be keeping people, by the looks of it, of people like Jacob Rees-Mogg if he keeps his seat next year. Well, potentially next year. The odds are he might lose it to a Lib Dem. but we'll see what happens. Honestly, the way that the Tory party is going and that they are acting, they are in, I would say, at least a decade, if not more, of being out of power. And I've said this before, this gives us huge, huge opportunities to be able to do a ton of stuff. And I will tell you this now. Let's say Tom Tugendhat comes out, votes for like something progressive that the Labour Party does. Let's say they do renter reform, and Tom Tugendhat comes out and supports it and votes for it from through Parliament. Excellent, great. You know, we shouldn't turn down a vote on something like that. But at that point, as we've always said throughout all this video, it's too little, too late. You could have been doing this for 13 years, for fighting for these policies, and yet you've done nothing, and you've delivered on none of these promises of things that you've done. I've said it before. The Northern Powerhouse could have been genuinely very good and transformative for the North. So could leveling up if they'd actually committed to spending the money on these projects, but they did not. And the next general election is going to be a loss of 13 years of Tory incompetence, failure, and just short sighted policies that they did for short term quick wins. And Rishi Sunak is going to leave office from a UK that is in a far, far worse state than what David Cameron took office from, where we were just recovering from the 2008 financial crash. Have the Tories made a better UK in those 13 years? No. They have made everything worse through bickering, through terrible policy decisions, through incompetence, through constant failure, and through short-sighted policy terms. And you want to know, if you want a good example, look at the recent video we did about them screwing up the decarbonization of the steel industry. You know, you cannot blame your loss on anyone else except you guys. It is the Tories' fault. They are going to lose, and to be honest, the voting population is very well aware, very well aware of what they have been up to, and it is no longer hideable, to be honest. And even after the next decade or the next two general elections, voters are going to have a very long memory. Voters are going to have a very long memory, and the hope is that they will not be able to get into power even after that time. Maybe they might reclaim some seats, or at least maybe reclaim some MPs, but hopefully they will not be in power for quite some time. And this gives us progressives here in the UK a massive untold opportunities to pass really good progressive policies looking ahead, and there's going to be nothing that they can do about it because they're going to be failing. And that does open up the way for PR. It opens up the door massively for PR. So I do think over the next two parliaments, maybe not the next parliament, but maybe the one after that, that's where we could see it. But we have to start now and have to start pushing for it now. So join groups like Labour for PR, the Electoral Reform Society. Look what they're doing. Join these groups that are pushing for PR. And if you are in another party, the Lib Dems, the Greens, even if you are a Tory and you agree with PR, look for your fellow PR advocates in your party and start to work together to push for that, because this will be truly transformational for this country. And if we can't get Westminster, then let's do it to the House of Lords, because, oh boy, that's an easy slam dunk win that even the Conservatives voters agree with. So there are massive opportunities that lie ahead for us, and we are going into a perfect position where we can really take hold of those opportunities. And I really do mean it. There is a lot of hope coming forward. But first of all, we've got to get the Tories completely gone and get Keir Starmer in. And to be honest, he's got a lot of work to do. He's got a lot of work to do. I think the first two years in his office is going to be sorting out this absolute god-awful Tory mess. But this does not, of course, wipe away the potential progressive opportunities that this does present for us progressives here in the UK. So, as always, thank you very much for watching, and of course, we'll see you all next time.